Hello, 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 hello. Okay, yep. Hello, this is Chiak. We are back with Omen Exitio Plague because we have the side story singular to do. The beginning, and I checked. There were no DLCs for more side stories, so their side stories is just one story, which is the beginning. I don't know how long this is. So this could, I imagine, just at max would be 2 sets, if not 1. I doubt 1. I don't think I have the time for the 1. Now, out of curiosity, what is this? Okay, let's read this first. The mission. Dear Sir, you're hereby convocated by the British Navy to participate in mission to the recently acquired territory of Zanzibar in British East Africa. Your experience and abilities are to be placed at the disposal of Lieutenant James Rogers in a small regiment there. Lieutenant Rogers has requested your presence personally, praising your expert knowledge of cartography and strategy. Further details will be communicated to you upon arrival. At the Stone Town headquarters, departure is scheduled for 10th July from the London docks. 26th July, 1896, traveling. I am soon to be a father. That's how I want to begin this diary, by remembering what it is, courtesy of the British Navy. That I am leaving behind in taking part that I'm leaving behind in taking part in this mission. Of course, I would have preferred a very different sort of gift for the birth of my son, especially from James, and with such coldly summarized information. Excuse me. I hate it when they do this. How do they suppose I am to develop a strategy if their strategy is to keep me in the dark about all the important details? We soldiers are nothing more than puppets for them, dancing to their music, but to be quite honest, I'm getting sick of dancing. I really hope James has an excellent reason to be dragging me so far away from my family to Zanzibar. I don't think I'll ever forgive him if my son is born while I'm on this mission. Now I think I'll head up to the bridge to get some air, and perhaps the ocean view will help me relax a little. Okay, so what is our character? Eric McLean. London. Military cartographer. Married. Okay. The weight of duty. Let's go. Your name is Eric McLean. You have been assigned a mission to Zanzibar. Lieutenant Rogers has asked for you specifically, and the commanding officer has granted his wish. It was with an extremely heavy heart that you set sail, taking with you only the mission briefing and the absolute necessities for your journey. In accepting this mission, you had to abandon the grey skies of London and your 8-month pregnant wife. As you are staring out towards the horizon from the ship's bridge, a soldier walks up and salutes you amiably. He has the look of one who could talk for hours, and you absent-mindedly suspect that you are not the first person he has approached this morning. A quick glance at his uniform tells you that he is a corporal. Hi, Regulator. How slowly time goes here, don't you think? To say nothing of the heat. Absolutely suffocating. I can't tell you how much I miss summer rain back home. He comes right up next to you as if he has known you for years, imitating your posture carefully. He puts a hand on the railing and lets his gaze drift out to sea, also contemplating the infinite expanse of water. I enlisted in the end, though. I had nothing better to do anyway, you see. Every day, plowing, sowing, reaping. Enough of that life. It was time for a change. The talkative corporal turns to look at you, analyzing you as if trying to solve some sort of odd enigma. And you, how did you end up here? So it's either explain the details of your story, tell him the absolute minimum, try to get rid of him. Let's just go for detailed. Just friendly talking. Let's just unload all of our problems on him. Lieutenant Rogers sent for me. He was my drill sergeant before becoming lieutenant. After training, sorry, I just want to laugh. After training, I've been involved in various missions of his. Lieutenant Rogers? Lieutenant James Rogers? Are you jesting? Look, I come from Oswestry, the most remote village in all of bloody England. Around my way, they don't even know the name of the Queen, but you just try asking about James Rogers and everyone will have something to say. Even crazy old Bradley. Everyone knows what the lieutenant did. He's a legend. Everyone knows about it, and everyone seems to know the lieutenant's nickname since the fateful day, the Guardian. You know for sure, however, that it was no mere legend. You saw everything with your own eyes. Rogers was absolutely unstoppable that day. Although his body was as bullet-ridden and wounded as yours, his steadfast determination would make him immortal. The enemies dropped like flies faced with the strange fury that had possessed Rogers, more than willing to give his own life for his fellow soldiers. Tried to brush over the legend, tell the story of the corporal. Yeah, let's we're in a village in Southern Africa. The regiment I was stationed with had been largely massacred by a group of natives. The village was surrounded and there was no chance of escape whatsoever. The corporal initially seemed shocked by your words, until he realizes where your story is heading. Wait a sec, so you were there on that expedition? Lieutenant Rogers saved us all that day, even though he knew it meant certain death. He covered our escape and single-handedly killed a dozen enemy warriors. You went as images from that awful day replay in your mind and make your stomach churn. Closing your eyes, once again you can see the terrible specter of Rogers using his body as a human shield. Incredible. So, the stories are true. Not all of them, but Rogers did risk his life for us, which is enough. The Guardian is much more than a nickname. You continue talking with the man about those events for some time. You even find yourself getting into the details of the story. Then you notice the outline of a city beginning to appear on the horizon. The corporal goes, leaving you alone on the bridge, waiting for the ship to dock. Your ship anchors at Stone Town. About to disembark, you are watching other recruits from London shuffling down the gangway, their blank eyes staring into space. But then, of course, no one likes being so far from home. With movements as precise and graceful as a dancer, you retrieve a match from the small box in your right pocket, strike it rapidly on your leather belt, and bring its flames to the cigarette between your lips. Its glowing tip fills your lungs with the flavor of strong tobacco. You exhale slowly, letting twisting clouds of smoke circle around your head. You're rolling the cigarette between your lips, backwards and forwards, in imitation of the ship's silent roll. For a moment, you linger to watch your comrades trudging over the gangway onto land, before finally deciding to join the exodus. Hauling your belongings onto your back, you head towards the port. Okay. It's interesting. We have a map and... Corporal... Okay, we have cigarette matches, cartographer equipment, enlistment notice, which we read in our diary. And we're just back in Zanzibar. Got it. Explore the surroundings first. Take the map from your rucksack and explore straight to your destination. Report straight to your destination. Let's explore. The port is teeming with activity. From up on the ship, your first impressions had been of a huge swarming termite mound. Now, down here, yourself a part of that chaotic colony, you're enveloped and dragged along by a tide of busy people moving away from the port. The agitation amongst the trader is intense, and seems to be only one rule. He who screams loudest sells the most. The bright colors leap out at you from the stalls, luminous as fireflies in the dead of night. Without further hesitation, you take out your map of the city. You're giving free rein to your will to explore, and you are drawn to the darkest and most hidden away alleys. From one of these alleyways, you hear something which captures your attention. From a thin sliver of darkness, you detect a faint moaning sound, and then you see a pair of eyes watching you, like bright white holes in the darkness. There's a tall man who looks like he needs help. Try to give assistance to the victim. The moment you step into the alley, the powerful smell of spices is instantly replaced by a stench of decay and rotting flesh. The dark silhouette suddenly launches itself at you, shrieking as if possessed. Catching you by surprise, he manages to get his hands around your neck and throws you backwards against the wall. The only thing you see is his skin, black like burnt earth. His strong fingers are sinking into your flesh, and although you manage to throw a couple of strong punches into the darkness, the native is no less strong. A gunshot. Oh my god. A gunshot. With a strange gurgling sound, your attacker drops to the ground, and you see that his head now has an interesting topography. There are rivers, lakes of blood, and patchy islets? I actually do not know how to pronounce this. Of skin. You're suddenly able to breathe, and despite gasping and coughing uncontrollably, instinct pushes you in the direction of your savior. Breathing heavily, you notice the pistol, still smoking in the hands of the person at the entrance of the alley. Then you see the English uniform he has tied around his neck and resting on his shoulders. A couple of minutes later, and that savage would have killed you. The man puts his gun back into its holster, and approaches you, his tentative smile framed by a scruffy, unkempt beard. Were you not taught to refuse sweets from strangers? You were about to thank him, but still dazed by this peculiar situation, you hold your tongue and merely stare at him quizzically. Hey, what do we have here? He crouches to pick up the map, which has fallen from your hands during the scuffle with the native. So it's you, the cartographer. Okay, why is this italicized? The man smiles glibly, but everything about his attitude reeks of mockery, especially the way in which he cheekily emphasizes the word cartographer. You brusquely snatch back the map and glare at him with barely contained frustration and impatience. Amidst being the cartographer, teach the arrogant soldier a lesson. Sure, we'll just admit it. In person. Eric McLean and you? I was sent to meet you and take you back to headquarters. They were beginning to think you had got lost. You would like to address the stranger's lack of manners. He didn't even tell you his name, but he goes on speaking before you can even open your mouth. It's a stone's throw to the headquarters. Follow me. They're waiting for us. Stone Town is a labyrinth of streets, topped on all sides with blindly white sunlight, kept at bay only by the numerous layers of colorful drapes, giving some degree of shade to daring merchants with their sought-after bric-a-brac. You reach the headquarters in only a few minutes. Merely looking up at the large, square building makes your head spin. You have never liked authority, and you hope to get out on the mission, so you can get it done and go home just as quickly. Your eyes dart around, looking for Rogers. It would be a relief to see a friendly face in the midst of all these strutting officers and busy soldiers. The lieutenant has always genuinely appreciated your strategic and military skills, and he would never miss an opportunity to sing your praises in front of other officers. You suppose he must have been doing just that prior to your summons to come to Zanzibar. Finally, through the mass of people, you spot him, intently observing the training sessions of a group of recruits. The sight of him spurs you on, and you push briskly past your irritating companion. You are already breathing more easily when your friend turns to see you and recognizes you immediately. Eric, so you finally arrived. Rogers greets you with a warm embrace, despite knowing your distaste for such gestures. That was your wife, and the little one won't be long now, will it? Already sufficiently embarrassed by the situation, you then feel the idiotic grin of your accompanying soldier watching you, and so you hesitate in your embrace. Rogers notices your embarrassment at his sign of affection and resumes a formal air. Tell me your qualms about this mission? Just keep it friendly. Okay, there we go. Just want to get rid of the shiny. Pleased to be here, Lieutenant. Elizabeth is fine, and it won't be long until we meet the baby. Despite doing your utmost not to think about the unpleasant nodding feeling gripping your stomach, a sensation you feel every time you picture not getting back to see the birth of your child, the lieutenant seems to notice, and you detect an expression of regret appear on his face. Okay. So, we tried to keep it friendly, but apparently... I'm so sorry to have dragged you into this situation, Eric. He puts a hand lightly on your shoulder, and the annoyance you had been feeling at being summoned here to Zanzibar seems to melt away at this, his sincere apology. I promise you will be home soon. Your escort soldier is at your side listening to the conversation. You notice how, in the meantime, he has put on his uniform jacket in an attempt to look presentable at least. Roger turns to him. By the way, McLean, have you met Thomas Lloyd? He too will be part of our mission as a scout. He's the best there is in Zanzibar. This sudden revelation catches you by surprise. Nevertheless, you try to appear unruffled. You are, however, finding it hard to believe Roger's words. The best scout in Zanzibar? Him? Lloyd is looking pleased with himself. He's still grinning at you smugly. You're quite sure he's even visibly puffing out his chest with pride. This mission is proving more irritating than expected, and on top of that, you still don't even know any details about it. It's just... I mean, is he gonna say right in the middle of here? Let's ask. Lieutenant, why are we here? We shall have time to speak of it later, McLean. The gladness in Roger's eyes is slowly replaced by a glimmer of concern, and his expression darkens. As you had suspected, the lieutenant summoning you to Zanzibar means the matter must be extremely serious. The lieutenant sighs and throws you a final worried glance, before gesturing towards a door nearby. Let's go in here and clarify for you some of the mission details in a meeting with the officer in command. Roger approaches the door and hesitates for a few seconds, his hand motionless in the air. His face contracts, almost in anguish, and then relaxes. He knocks twice briskly and opens the door. You walk into this sparsely furnished room, noticing that the various cabinets and bookcases are too few to really fill the space. The room dominated by the imposing desk in front of you. Standing by the window, his back towards you, is the commanding officer. It seems his attention has been caught by something happening outside in the rectangular yard to the rear of the building. Most likely a group of soldiers carrying out their early morning exercises and inspections. Yeah, there, I was wondering if it's gonna be Smith. He becomes aware of your arrival, and as if suddenly coming to his senses from a dream, he turns towards you. His outward appearance alone inspires a certain amount of awe, and his eyes, fixing on yours in turn, betrays nothing whatsoever. You cannot help but see on his chest a frankly ridiculous number of medals and ribbons. Finally, you're here. My name is Captain Smith. I have been waiting for you. He approaches his desk and sits down on the chair. You're standing side by side in front of him. You're feeling like one of those led soldiers you used to play with as a child, and your mind inevitably returns to your life and your family back in London. Then, at the sound of the officer's voice, your attention returns to the mission. As perhaps you already know, the situation here in Zanzibar is extremely unstable, and not only politically. There have been numerous problems with the natives over recent months. They have been agitating in villages under British protection. Last month, they were here causing trouble in Stone Town itself, and this we cannot tolerate. Smith's face betrays a glimmer of disgust before he regains objectivity and speaks again. The natives always act in groups and always manage to keep far away from British activities, as though they had prior knowledge of our movements. Their actions are creating mass panic in the local villages. Thus far, we have been unable to flush them out via counter-offensive strikes, and all attempts at locating their hideouts with search teams have proved unsuccessful. Although the captain appears to be flicking absent-mindedly through files on his desk, his tone is deadly serious, like a funeral eulogy or a thinly veiled admonition. At his final words, Roger stares down at his feet. That's the reason for your summons. You are to comb the island from top to bottom until you locate their secret hideout. You will need to be both stealthy and resourceful. These natives, savages, are well organized. Perhaps too organized. Oh, this is the diary. Okay. Huh. This is the diary from the main story that that we lost, then we got back. Everyone seemed to want. Smith has a moment of hesitation during which he looks again at you both, one by one, before getting up from his chair and returning to his position by the window to reflect upon the world beyond. Okay, stay silent, lost in your thoughts. Comment upon the ineffectiveness of the British troops. Maybe let's not do that. I feel like if we do this, we're technically insulting him. Advance your suspicions regarding Savage's tactics. Okay, let's just wait. For now, you prefer to hold your tongue on the whole situation, but it does seem rather illogical. Natives capable of organizing themselves to defeat British soldiers? It's hard to believe, but you have no doubts that Smith is far from joking. Sir, are we quite sure they are natives? There could be other parties involved. Your old friend gives voice to your suspicions. Glancing at Rogers out of the corner of your eyes, you see he still has his eyes lowered to the floor. After a few more seconds, though, he finds the nerve to look up at the captain. Is this some kind of joke? The Savagers have never been seen doing much more than shaking their rattles at us and grunting. Consistent, if nothing else, Lloyd is revealing his arrogance even to Smith. All eyes are now directed at the scout who, puffed up with his own assertions, quite ignores everyone's scandalized looks. We do, of course, suspect paramilitary connections, or even that the Germans are in some way behind these actions. The captain then narrows his eyes and turns towards Lloyd. You must learn that there is a first time for everything, Mr. Lloyd, and also when it is better to keep one's tongue. The scout's eager smile freezes the moment he hears Smith's words. He visibly withers on the spot, and you cannot but help finding enjoyment in his discomfort. First, you'll be heading towards the last place where the Savages were seen, a village not too far from Stonetown. I want to remind you all that this is a reconnaissance mission, not active engagement. You sigh inwardly with relief. Of course, you would still prefer to be at home, but it could have been much worse. You will be accompanied on the mission by an interpreter. You will need him. Almost no one on the island can speak English. The captain looks at each of you one last time. He lingers on Rogers, who stares back intensely as if the two were conversing with their eyes. Then, after a brief, awkward silence, Smith abruptly ends the conversation. Good luck, soldiers. You file out of the room one by one. Rogers scratches insistently at his wrist, a gesture that you know all too well. A glance is enough to confirm your suspicions. The lieutenant has a patch of red skin there caused by constant scratching. Your consternation increases when you see the lieutenant more agitated than he's ever been before. You have the feeling he's keeping something from you, and that hunch is slowly turning into a certainty. Rogers used to scratch at his hands that way only during the most risky missions. Try to find out what's bothering your friend. Of course, we're just gonna ask. You walk up to the lieutenant and, making sure that no one can overhear, you inquire as to his well-being. James, Is there something wrong? He hesitates for a moment and looks around cautiously. Only now do you notice dark circles around his eyes, accentuated by the strange pallor of his skin. It catches you by surprise and gives Rogers just enough time to recover to process your question. It's nothing. He smiles at you, puts a hand on your shoulder and squeezes it. Let's deal with these savages right away. I want you home in time for the big day. Before you have time to reply, he claps your back and turns around and marches off. The headquarters building is still a riot of people moving in all directions. Then you see, amongst the confusion of training soldiers, people moving supplies and busy medics. A man who is different to the rest, and he is moving towards you. He is different not only in the dark bronze of his skin, but also in his conspicuous composure, like the calm at the center of a storm. Rogers welcomes him, shakes his hand, and they exchange a few words. Then Rogers turns around to introduce you. Eric, this is Mr. Saeed. Ajwana. He is our interpreter of the mission. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. He puts his hands to his stomach and makes a slight bow. His English pronunciation is practically perfect and appears to be extremely courteous. Be polite. My name is Eric McLean. It's nice to meet you. Likewise, Mr. McLean. After your first encounter with Lloyd and Roger's current level of tension, you're pleased to meet someone displaying such naturalness, especially for someone like Saeed. This is our scout, Thomas Lloyd. Lloyd throws a shrewd smile at the interpreter and raises a hand in greeting. As Roger slips back into his role as the lieutenant, you know and respect his body stiffens up and his face becomes deadly serious. Soldiers, report to the armory for supplies. Rendezvous at the headquarters gate in 2 hours. You leave the group in quick march towards the armory, glad to get away from Roger's uncharacteristic anxiousness and Lloyd's aggravating sarcasm, pleased also to finally have some time alone to collect your thoughts. Once you have all the equipment you will likely need, you are ready to make your final preparations for departure. You put your maps in your rucksack, then take out your leather-bound diary. You feel a strong urge to vent all the tension and anger accumulated over the course of the morning. It turns out that the blank page is a good listener. It doesn't judge your irritable mood and limits itself to recording your thoughts. You get caught up in writing, completely lose track of time. Before you know it, you're hauling your rucksack onto your shoulder and heading off to meet the others. Okay, let's just... Okay, we have their weapon. Now I'm assuming you got another diary entry? No, we don't. Oh wait, we do. Okay. July 26th, 1896, Stonetown, an unfortunate regiment. I can't stand this place. I've just risked making my son an orphan even before starting the mission. Man lunged out of an alley trying to kill me. As if that wasn't enough, I couldn't even manage to knock his teeth out. It felt like I was punching a brick wall. The icing on the cake? It was Lloyd who finished him off. Thomas Lloyd, the goddamn king of fools. He is supposedly the scout who is navigating our mission. He's more annoying and conceited than Zanzibar's damn mosquitoes. He's been trying to goad me since we met him in that unfortunate situation. But he'll learn soon enough not to test my patience. We met Captain Smith and he told us about the savages who are making raids on the British and our allies. They appear too well organized to be primitive savages, but I'm finding it hard to believe it. I doubt the man who tried to kill me was capable of anything more than screaming and frothing at the mouth. Never seen James look so distressed, not even that time. He has aged considerably too, much faster than is natural. Our mission is to go on reconnaissance and find this group of savages. Alongside us, there will be an interpreter, Saeed, a courteous local man. He appears to be the most well-adjusted person in the whole affair. I can't wait to get this mission over. Furthermore, I still have no idea what I am doing here. With complete and up-to-date maps of Zanzibar, a scout, and a local interpreter, What need can the lieutenant possibly have for me? Yet he couldn't have called me here without valid reasons. James wouldn't do that. Or would he? Okay. Over the course of the hike to the first stop on your reconnaissance mission, you keep your eyes glued to the maps of the local area that you have been able to procure. There, with the safety net of that perfect world of stops and comfortably detailed red lines, you almost feel at home. Still looking at those 10 maps, McLean? Or are you scared of getting lost? Careful not to be within earshot of Lieutenant Rogers, who is marching a few meters behind you. Lloyd keeps on at you. I really don't see what a man like you is doing on this mission. Your grip involuntarily tightens around the worn and slightly yellowed maps, scratching up the paper at the edges. Just go patient. You act superior? Deal with him. You act superior, nonchalant. Avoid answering him. It's kind of weird. I'm like, when I say you act superior, I'm not sure if I would place patient, but we'll see what the response is. Don't worry, Thomas. I'm sure you'll figure it out at some point. Until then, maybe you're better focusing on the mission, eh? What's this? McLean has a pair of balls after all. Lloyd is definitely riled by your apparent calmness. He doesn't seem to notice or intuit that you are desperately trying to contain your rising anger. You turn away from him and go on marching. Can you hear me, McLean? I'm talking to you. We can all hear you, Soldier Lloyd, but you might need to shout even louder if you're trying to give away our whereabouts to the savages. I'm sorry, Lieutenant. You would do well to keep yourself in check, soldier. That is, unless you are actually trying to get reported. Roger's providential intervention came just in time. You were on the cusp of losing your temper, and if you had, nothing would have stopped you from bashing in that ugly face of his. The march continues for a few more hours, till Rogers orders a break to stop and have something to eat. You find shade under some trees in the vicinity. Lloyd sits down next to you, holding in his hand 2 bowls of spiced rice. Avoiding your gaze, he holds one of them out to you. I think we got off on the wrong foot, you and I. You take the bowl distrustfully, give it a quick whiff to check that Lloyd has not peed in it, or worse. Despite the surprising friendliness of his tone, you are still suspicious of anything he says. He's probably still mocking you somehow. It's my fault, I know. It's just that... Never mind. You wouldn't understand. You stare at him intently and perplexedly. Is this Thomas Lloyd, fearless braggart, really trying to confide in you? Could it be that your little exchange on the march has knocked some sense into that silly posturing head of his? Let's encourage him to go on. You put your rice bowl down for a moment, take out a cigarette, and a second one to offer to the scout. You've never been much good at these things, but there's nothing like a shared smoke to help along a conversation. Try me. Now it is Lloyd's turn to be suspicious, but he accepts your offer of a smoke. He too rests his practically untouched rice bowl on the ground and stands up. You smoke in silence, without making eye contact, and only after you have both finished and flicked away your cigarette butts does the scout find the nerve to continue the conversation. Since I was a small boy, I've never had much luck with other people. The origins of the monster? Are you unsure whether you really want to get into such issues with a person who, so far, has shown himself to be the embodiment of everything you detest? Now, however, you're already involved, and somehow you're going to have to get through it. Okay, let's share with him an anecdote from your past. Everyone has had problems, Lloyd. My father believed the belt was the most effective way of teaching a child. Then, how did you resolve this problem? Despite looking elsewhere, Lloyd seems interested in your story. My father made a big mistake. You specifically avoid being clear or concise in your explanation, teasing his curiosity. Then you are suddenly aware of the ridiculousness and theatra- theatricality of your response and decide to relent. He never considered that one day I would be bigger and stronger than him. Lloyd's expression has changed markedly. He's far less supercilious and more relaxed. He doesn't appear to be mocking you, not this time. On the contrary, he seems rather affected by your story. He got what he deserved. How did I... It said I met a new character. Or maybe it just updated. Oh, the new character I met was the father. Interesting. What does this say? Highly decorated officer in the British Armed Forces, famous strategist, and feared by everyone, including his fellow soldiers. Your father never made a secret of his complete and utter disregard for human suffering, both on the battlefield and at home. He drowned his feelings of guilt with the bottle. He got what he deserved, dismissed and disgraced when James Rogers reported his war crimes to his superiors. After a few moments of silence, Lloyd gets up and walks off. You absentmindedly follow him with your eyes, but you are no longer paying much attention to his state of mind. After all, his problems are no business of yours. Get your strength back. There's a long march ahead. You're thinking that you could make use of this short rest to exchange a few words with the other members of the regiment. You might speak with the lieutenant, with the interpreter, or simply begin keeping a diary of the mission. The last option has always helped clear your head in the past. Let's talk to the lieutenant. You decide to go up to the Lieutenant Rogers and try to get some answers from him regarding the real reason for your involvement in the mission. They even a local interpreter who surely... Okay, I'm supposed to assume there is supposed to be a have here, but they even have a local interpreter who surely knows the area better than you. And it seems implausible that Rogers has sent for you for merely personal reasons. Lieutenant? Eric, is everything okay? Well, sir, I want to know why you wanted me specifically on this mission. Or you say, you're essential elements in this mission. That is, Lloyd is a great scout, but he over-relies on his instincts. You're the man I really need, especially since... Lieutenant stops and looks away, out over the thick vegetations. He's keeping something from you, but it seems incredible that Rogers, a man with whom you've spent the better parts of your life, once confined in you. We'll talk about later. He still appears unwilling to tell you what it is that is tormenting him so much. As you wish, sir. You take your leave of the lieutenant, who stays there a while lost in thought. Let's talk to the interpreter. Seed, sitting on the outskirts of the regiment, does not appear to be a sociable person. You notice too that from time to time he looks up and scans the horizon, as if looking for something. Seed? He flinches slightly, but you ignore the gesture. You would prefer this conversation to be short as possible, even at the risk of seeming somewhat over-direct. I'd like to consult with you about the journey ahead. You take out the map and unfold it before the interpreter. At this, he seems to recover from his initial shock and gives you a warm smile. As you wish, Effendi. It will be a good opportunity to learn to read your type of maps. You hold back the temptation to inquire as to the meaning of that word, Effendi, and direct his attention to the map. Your goal is to combine your expertise in cartography with Saeed's knowledge of the local area. In the meantime, however, the interpreter begins telling you other unrelated bits of information. He starts telling you details about his wife and 3 children, immediately bringing to mind images of your home, your wife, and your coming child. You wrap up this tete-a-tete in haste, wishing to avoid the source of unpleasant nostalgia nodding up inside you. You have, however, learnt some useful details from the seemingly quiet interpreter, who proved to be far more loquacious than you had initially reckoned. Okay, let's go record that diary. Taking this brief opportunity to note down some of the mission events so far, you settle In a secluded part of the temporary camp, reorder your thoughts and put down a few lines of ink. As you are writing, you can feel your negative feelings about the walk and the conversation with Lloyd begin to slide away and slowly subside. Okay. Towards the village, we stopped for a short rest. The rice wasn't very good, but I did have a peculiar conversation with Lloyd. He began to tell me of his life story, and he turns out to be much less irritating than I first thought. I was wrong about him. He isn't the king of fools, only a sort of minor prince. I'm not particularly good at this sort of thing. Lloyd should speak to the lieutenant, since he's good with his words. If only James wasn't so uneasy. He was about to tell me something important, but then he went silent and kept it to himself. I don't know what to think. The mission doesn't seem too difficult overall, and the journey proceeds as planned. Yet his agitation worries me. I've known the lieutenant for such a long time now, and he's never been so distant. Perhaps there really is no good reason for my being here, but I don't want to believe it. The more James keeps trying to avoid the subject, the worse the feeling in the pit of my stomach. I spoke to the interpreter with the intentions of studying the maps and deciding a route, but instead I got an extended monologue on his family. All three of his children are studying English as well, in the hope that they too can make their way in the world and have a good position in society. That reminded me of my father. Ever since I was very young, he only saw one future for me, in the service of the British Empire. Yet I held my tongue on such matters. Who am I, after all, to question Saeed's parenting decisions? I know one thing for sure, though. When I am a father, my son will never have to suffer for the decisions that I make for him. Talking to the interpreter made me think once again about London. I must learn to mind my own business. Hi, Aisha? I hope I say your name right. Get to rest soon? Oh, thank you for coming and dropping in saying hi. And have a good night. Have a good rest. Have some pleasant dreams. Let's march. After all the necessary preparations are made, the march resumes. Thankfully, you already have the location of various local settlements marked out on your map. Your destination, Nungui? Nungui, looks to be about an hour's march from your current position. You keep your eyes on the map, on the route that you yourself have traced out, certain that it will bring you to your destination. Saeed and Lloyd take care of the rest. You're surprised at how the scout actually is able to remain silent for more than 10 seconds, but it's a passing thought, a silent interference in your perfect concentration on your map. The vegetation starts to become more sparse, revealing a small settlement, a collection of huts built with materials from the surrounding landscape. There are few inhabitants, and from the moment of your entrance, no one takes their eyes off you. The atmosphere is just becoming tense when Saeed goes up to a small group of natives gathered near a hut. Lieutenant Rogers motions you to go with him. The interpreter is speaking to them in an incomprehensible language and sporadically turns to translate their speech. They say men attacked them, Effendi. When he turns back to the natives, you see him frown, and his expression suddenly darkens, as if he can't quite grasp the reality of what the villagers are saying. By savages, more beasts than human. You hear the interpreter's voice trembling a little, but you have already turned back to look at Lieutenant Rogers. A small, disorganized raid, pretty much the opposite of Captain Smith's information. Have the savages changed strategy? You need to know more, so you turn back to the interpreter. Can they tell us more details about these savages? See translates your question into the strange language. The natives all begin shouting manically, their terrified eyes bulging, their arms waving in an attempt to describe something which you understand from their gestures alone must be utterly unspeakable. The interpreter now appears frozen on the spot. his eyes perfectly reflecting those of the natives and his body racked by violent dread. Mr. Arjuana? Seed? The man gasps and splutters, staring at you like a ghost. The shock seems to have rendered him temporarily incapable of speaking English. When he speaks again, his voice barely reaches you. They eat. They eat. What do you mean, Saeed? The interpreter rests a hand on your shoulder, mainly to stop himself collapsing. Men. Cannibalism. It is not the first time you've heard of it, but this doesn't stop your guts wrapping up in your stomach at the thought, giving you some nausea. The villagers go on to tell you that the savages have escaped to a cave nearby where, by all accounts, they perform their rituals. Marking the approximate location of this cave on your map, you then return with Saeed to Lloyd and Rogers as to update them on the information thus gleaned. The lieutenant's face darkens yet again, and after mumbling something to himself, he calls out the order to head towards the cave. Lloyd turns around to you and gives you another sarcastic grin. Straight to the mouth of hell, huh? You don't reply, and you really hope he's wrong. Excuse me, I had to yawn there. The Wailing Grotto. Okay. And just looking at my time, so just to say, I saw that this, I believe, I couldn't find a definite time, but just basing on the how long to beat website, I'm assuming the side story is an hour and a half. So it'll be longer because I'm reading it out loud. So I'm going to say it's probably 2 hours. So let's see how long this chapter is. You are following the villagers' directions, heading roughly southeast through the jungle. You have circled the location of several caves. You have circled the location of the caves several times on your map, almost manically, as if it represented a singular element of chaos in all the geometric perfection. It takes a while before you find an entrance to the cave. A shroud as it is in dense vegetation, Lloyd clears away the frustrating tropical foliage to reveal a narrow mouth leading down into the darkness. You had expected a much larger cave, not this strange open wound in the bare earth. You file into the cavern through suffocating, ever-narrowing passageways. I can't see a bloody thing. Just after his complaint, the scout unshoulders his rucksack and takes out several lanterns. As they light, their flames began to flicker on the walls of the cave, dancing like little flames in a storm. You cannot rapidly, in single file, and as the interminable minutes pass, the lack of directions is making you feel mad. In certain tracks, you can hear the wind whistling low, resonating through the chambers, brushing past your ears and raising the hair on the back of your neck. At a sudden, louder, more instant murmuring groan, you quickly turn around to look behind you. You come to a stop, face to face with Seed, the innumerable wrinkles of his face brilliantly picked out by the light from the lantern. His indecipherable, panic-stricken eyes are staring straight back at you. We must leave, Effendi. Cursed place, evil spirits calling our name. His English syntax disintegrates in the face of the sheer terror dripping from his every pore. You can't help noticing how he keeps looking around obsessively. Now's not the time to panic, Seed. You're about to turn to continue onwards, but Seed grabs your arm. They devour us. The spirits will devour us. You turn away and briskly shake off the interpreter's bony fingers, as well as his ominous warnings. Is this gonna go throughout the entire thing? Okay, thank God. Suddenly you see lights coming from the depths of the cave up ahead. As you approach it, begins to cast disturbing shadows onto the black walls around you. They stretch backwards in complex, dark ripples, like the undulating stripes of a lurking tiger. A strange litany echoes in your ears, reverberating with throaty, mournful voices. The silhouette of Roger's head turns and gives a silent order. You all turn off your lanterns instantly. You continue your approach in silence, crawling over the black shapes carved into the rock. The lieutenant comes over to you, looks at you, and nods. You know perfectly well what he's saying. No sudden movements. The scene being unveiled before your eyes shocks you to your very core. There are men droning, chanting, apparently lost in trance, standing motionless in a circle at the foot of a large stone altar. The chamber room is brightly lit by torches circling the walls, and there seems to be no other way in or out except the corridor you are in. Above the altar, in the center of the room, there is a small boy tied with thick ropes to the rock, wriggling furiously. His wailing and cries of pain are interspersed with incomprehensible mutterings in words you don't understand. One of the men approaches the altar with a small dagger in his hands, all the while continuing the diabolical chanting. His intentions is quite clear. His grip on the dagger tightens. The boy screams, and the light from the torches begin to fill the chamber, casting the sacrificial victim in a whole new light. In its brilliant glow, his brown skin appears suddenly pale, and in a brief moment's lucidity, you realize that he is staring straight at you. His lips part, as if trying to speak. The monotonous chanting intensifies. This horrible scene has planted something in your mind that is driving you to distraction. If this were your son, you would not be standing there doing nothing. The boy's screams increase in volume as the figure before you raises his ceremonial dagger. You turn to your companions and your eyes meet those of Lloyd, who already has his pistol ready in his hands. He's just waiting for a signal. Let's intervene. There's a flashing explosion in the cave. Shrieks of pain start mingling with the ritual chanting, and a dagger drops from the savage's wounded hand. At first, the others don't even seem to notice their fallen cohort, and go on wailing ecstatically. Your eyes turn to Lloyd, who is still frozen in position, the smoking pistol held high, pointing straight at the wounded savage. How could he possibly have managed such a precise shot in the dim, flickering light of the torches, and at such a distance? The dazed savages turn to face you with their mouths gaping with confusion and dark eyes staring, struggling to make sense of your presence. Then one of the savages screams, the other reflectively takes up the call, and banshees howls, and the banshee howl they start to produce resonates in the stone around you to create a horrible, evil screeching sound. Oh shit. The lieutenant shoulders his rifle, and you do the same. Let's try to save the child. Ignoring the danger, you charge headlong into the enemy, wishing to get to the child as quickly as possible. You rush forward, holding the rifle tight, and you rapidly use up most of your bullets against the nearby savages. Screaming men fall at each shot, groaning incomprehensible death cries. Other savages begin to hide, some behind the altar, and others behind natural rock formations. They evidently have bows, because soon small black arrows start flying out of the recessed darkness. Make a dash. You rush the altar, exploiting the cover of darkness to get right into the center. You manage to close the final few meters by using your momentum to slide along the slimy wet stones of the cave floor. You're lying with your back flat against the flat stone, and you freeze while several pairs of dirty feet pass by inches from your head. Taking a deep breath, you reemerge from the altar and come directly down upon the head cultist, who has the dagger raised in his hands. The man notices you with surprise, his white eyes almost lost in the smoking darkness of your rifle barrel. Go to hell, you bastard. The scene being lit by the accompanying flash of gunpowder, you see the exact moment when the bullet rips into his forehead. Then there is an instant return to the relatively dim light coming from the torches. You quickly lower the rifle, take out your standard issue knife, and hastily cut the ropes, keeping the boy tied down. You hold him to you tightly, so that his spasm of fear do not trip you up. He is completely covered with blood, and you have no way of telling whether it belongs to him or the cultist you have just shot. Rogers and Lloyd cover your retreat back towards them from the altar. The battle is over, and it appears that none of the savages have survived the fury of your armed onslaught. With the passing of immediate danger, the chamber is suddenly silent, apart from the faint dripping of the cave's aquifers, and even Saeed's return towards the group, warily, however, as if expecting another attack from more savages any moment. Everyone all right? Lieutenant Doofley checks up on each of you, and he turns to the terrified boy, who hasn't stopped writhing and screaming for help. Put him on the ground. Let him breathe. The order is followed, and the boy's legs tremble like twigs in the breeze. He is greatly distressed and looking around. You realize that no one present will be able to give him much assurance. Saeed is still shaken by the sight of the ritual and all those bodies. Rogers is hyper-alert, looking around uneasily, and Lloyd... Well, Lloyd has just pulled out a cigarette and is asking you for a light. You sigh deeply and fall down onto your knees at the boy's side. You decide to ignore, for now, the fact that he will almost certainly understand little or nothing of anything you say. Boy, are you alright? His only response is to increase the pitch and intensity of the incomprehensible yells. Without warning, he lunges at you, pushes hard on your chest, and sends you tumbling backwards. Lloyd is quick to react and grabs his arm from behind before he does any damage. I think he likes you, McLean. But the scouts' jokes cannot lighten the atmosphere in a situation like this, especially when the boy, his body racked by violent spasms, vomits all over you and goes suddenly limp, falling unconscious. Your uniform is drenched in the stomach-churning mixture of bodily secretion, bile, and blood. Why blood? Silence falls over the scene, broken only by the insistent dripping of the cave and Saeed's retching. Even Lloyd, for once, dares not speak. Okay. So I think with that, I will end the set here. So again, I'm thinking 2 sets, but for all I know, maybe 3. I don't know how... I really just do not know how long the story is. But with that, thank you for liking if you liked. Thank you for commenting if you commented. Thank you for subscribing if you subscribed. Thank you for favoriting if you favorited. Thank you for simply clicking on this video. Hopefully we can... McLean can get cleaned up after this. Until next time, guys. See ya!